between these three Gulf states. Some of them have been eased in recent years, but they also in many ways seem to be competing for President Trump's attention and resources.
That's exactly right, particularly on access to these sensitive technologies, nuclear and supercomputing, chips manufacturing abilities. There's an absolute race for AI on a global sense, but also within the Gulf Cooperation Council states. That's really between Saudi Arabia and the UAE. Qatar is not as forward-looking there, but there is still this reticence of cooperation among the GCC states, and I think some apprehension, even within U.S. politics, about Qatar's role within the region. And so that's something that rears its head from time to time, usually in third countries. That could be a topic of discussion in terms of how the Gulf states manage a transition and intervene financially to support Syria. And it's been certainly an issue in the past in terms of Gulf support to Egypt and also to Lebanon.
In the past, as you know, there's been a tradition in American diplomacy in balancing American interests in this kind of economic deals, energy policy, but also emphasize messages on human rights. This is not the way that President Trump carries out policy.
No, human rights is no longer very much a foreign policy talking point of the U.S. administration. It won't be a focus of Secretary Rubio's remarks and engagements. And this is very much a conversation, I would say, on this trip of bilateral ties and bilateral economic ties more than anything. You're not going to see a lot of the regional files really a topic of public conversation. I'm sure that there will be behind the scenes pressure, particularly on humanitarian relief in Gaza, but it's not something that these states want to make as a top talking point or press point.
Hello.
They want to make
Good evening.
comfortable and to speak to the things that matter most to him, and that's going to be investment ties, military sales, and cooperation where they can on private equity and infrastructure investment in the region and back in the United States.
Thank you. Sharon Young, we'll have to leave it there, but thank you very much for joining us from Columbia University as we continue our special coverage of President Trump's
Hello, good evening.
First official tour, beginning here in the Saudi Kingdom, around the UK, around the world, and across the UK.
Museums the world over and tourism is becoming ever more dynamic and inclusive. And I've come to Doha in Qatar to find out how the extraordinary collection of the Museum of Islamic Art is telling stories that reach far beyond the Middle East. Join me, Alistair Soop, for Inside Museums on BBC News.
As the diplomatic wheels turn, the reality on the ground here in Ukraine is that the war continues with as much ferocity as ever. People here are uncertain about whether their cities will become the next front lines, or even a part of Russia in any future peace deal. Join me over there for more on BBC News. The trial continues. An Australian woman accused of murdering 3 relatives, attempting to murder a 4th at a lunch where she served poisonous mushrooms. Erin Patterson denies all the charges against her, with her defence saying the deaths were a terrible accident. For more on this case that's garnered huge attention here in Australia, join me on BBC News.
Welcome back to the studio in London. Israel's military says it has struck a Gaza hospital, which it says was housing militants. In a raid on Tuesday, the strike ended a brief pause in fighting to allow the release of a US-Israeli hostage. Hamas says the attack killed a journalist being treated after an Israeli attack last month. It comes as the UN has called for urgent international action to get aid into Gaza amidst fresh warnings that nearly 500,000 people there, 1 in 5 of the population, now faces catastrophic hunger. The Israeli government has allowed no food into Gaza for more than 2 months now. Global King reports a warning for you. His report does contain distressing images from the start.
Hunger visible as the Israeli blockade tightens its grip. The smaller you are, the harder the struggle. Dana Al-Hajj is 11 years old. She is disabled. Her mother Wafa has struggled to find food.
We are adults. We can handle it. But these kids are victims. They cannot handle it. They can die from hunger. If my girl doesn't die today, she will die tomorrow if this situation continues.
The hungry and the weak are everywhere. Islam Hajjaj and her 6-year-old daughter, Najla. Malnourished, eyes that already know immense loss.
Who will help me with my daughter? I lost another girl during the war. I gave birth to her, and she only lived for 1 month with me. And because of malnutrition and the cold, my daughter passed away.
Gaza is no longer a place of the modern world, but the medics here struggle on. In the past year, we followed the experiences of American doctor Sam Attar, fighting to save lives, too often losing. This little boy died from a shrapnel wound in his skull.
And afterwards, we all found out. We all just felt a little cold and detached from it, because it's stuff we're seeing all the time, and you save what you can, you mourn what you can, and then you move on. You have to.
Sam filmed much of what he saw, what will never leave him. The man arriving in the hospital with pieces of his dead child in a bag. I couldn't find her yesterday, but I looked for her today and I found her under the rubble of the bathroom. She was martyred and torn to pieces. A few days ago, we reported on this little girl, 5-month-old Siwar Ashura. Our journalist in Gaza went back to see her today. Her immune system is yielding to a skin infection. Hers, a cry for all the lost and broken children of Gaza. Fergal Keane, BBC News, Amon.
The head of the UN body that provides humanitarian relief in Gaza has told the BBC that Israel is weaponizing the delivery of food aid there. Action would be assessed as a war crime. Philippe Lazzarini, the director of the UN Relief and Works Agency, said that the response from Israel to the attacks by Hamas on October the 7th had been disproportionate, and that the international community had shown a monstrous indifference to the conflict. The Israeli government has accused UNRWA of complicity with Hamas. He was speaking to our international editor, Jeremy Bowen.
The Israelis say that your activities are hopelessly compromised in Gaza by infiltration by Hamas, and the fact that staffers of UNRWA actually took part in the killing on the 7th of October.
We are receiving hundreds of allegations from the state of Israel. Each time, as a rule-based organization, we keep asking for substantiated information. We never ever receive them.
On the subject of proof, on the Israeli government website, there's a link to a 73-page PDF with some names, ID pictures, documents which they say they captured in Gaza, which they say absolutely proves that UNRWA has been riddled by Hamas infiltration.
The UN keep asking Israel, please share this information. Until today, we haven't received any information from the government of Israel, except for the 19 staff who were allegedly incriminated to the massacre of October 7th. The agency decided to suspend the 19 staff, even for those for which there was absolutely no proof.
But they've got a point there, haven't they, that any essence of doubt about this whole thing does make it very difficult for you to continue. The Americans have frozen your funding.
I would disagree. We are in a war of narrative. There is a lot of propaganda. Never forget that the state of Israel has increased its budget by $150 million just for the propaganda.
Let us speak about what's going on at the moment in Gaza. Israel has not allowed any humanitarian aid in now for more than 2 months. How serious is the situation there for civilians?
Starvation is spreading. People are exhausted. People are hungry. And more now, we can expect that in the coming weeks, if no aid is coming in, that people will not just die because of the bombardment, but they will die because of the lack of food.
What about the Netanyahu claim that there's been all along a lot of food in Gaza? Are you saying he's telling lies?
Again, this is part of a broader narrative. Obviously, any diversion would be a matter of concern, but what I can tell you is whenever UNRWA, a UN agency, is distributing food, we're directly distributing the food to the people in need, which needs have been assessed by us.
Now, there is a new plan to try to get humanitarian aid in, which is to set up some hubs for distribution in the south of Gaza, protected by the Israeli military, but also private security, American private security, perhaps being involved in all of that. The UN has said they're not going to take any part of this. It's against humanitarian principles. But actually, it's better than nothing, isn't it?
We have humanitarian principle because this principle helps us to save life. What is today being proposed falls short from that. Yes, some people might receive food, but others will be discriminated and receive no food. And in a situation where food is not available, this is a recipe for chaos.
Do you think Israel is using food aid, medical aid, humanitarian aid as a weapon of war?
I have absolutely no doubt, and this is what we have witnessed during these last 19 months, but especially during this last 2 months.
That's a war crime.
That will be qualified as a war crime. The qualification will come from the ICJ, not from me.
What about those accusations made by the South Africans that genocide is taking place there, the elimination in whole or in part of a group, the destruction, the dislocation, the movements of people? Do you think it fits that category?
Listen, by any account, the destruction are massive. The number of people who have been killed is huge and certainly underestimated. We have seen the systematic destruction also of a school, of health center. People have been constant pinballs within Gaza, moving all the time. So there is absolutely no doubt that we are talking about massive atrocities.
Genocide?
It could end up to genocide.
When people look back at what's been happening in the future, will they see actually a big international failure here?
I think in the coming years we will realize how wrong we have been, how on the wrong side of the history we have been. We have, under our watch, let a massive atrocity unfold.
Would you include 7th of October in that?
I would definitely include also the 7th of October. The response also has been massive, has been disproportionate, basically almost leading to the annihilation of an entire population in their homeland. I mean, it's absolutely monstrous, especially in our countries where we have said never again. And there is a very, very deep feeling of injustice in the region, which is also fueling polarization.
Do you share that feeling?
I do share this feeling. It's deeply frustrating.
Thank you.
The director of UNRWA there, Philippe Lazzarini, speaking to our international editor, Jeremy Bowen. We're going to take you right to the heart of Paris at the moment, because this is a courthouse in Paris where many, many journalists, the police are there as well, are awaiting the arrival of Kim Kardashian. Expected at any moment, she may indeed be in this car that we are focused on, we're not quite sure. But she is due to testify today. It's such an eagerly awaited appearance because it's been nearly 10 years since masked men robbed her at gunpoint of millions of dollars of jewellery during Fashion Week. And we're just hearing from our colleagues in Paris and elsewhere as well. Inside the courthouse are 500 journalists. That's how big the story is, how eagerly everyone is waiting for her appearance. So cameras are all trained on this car, which we think has Kim Kardashian inside. She was due to arrive at this time. I think we can see her mum getting out of the car. We are waiting to see the Kardashian family there being supported. So her appearance today, 500 journalist, as I mentioned, waiting for her huge media attention. Crowds as well we've seen outside the courthouse in Paris, fans hoping to get a glimpse, and they are indeed able to get a glimpse, where it's a shame that that lamppost is in the way, but there she is, outside the courthouse and is due to go in. So lots of fans there who have said this is a great occasion to see Kim Kardashian in the flesh, why not, as she walks up the steps of the courthouse. So, her stylist, who was in the apartment at the time when the burglary took place, has already told the court that she heard Kim Kardashian plead for her life and absolutely thought the worst during the attack, despite moving testimony. Let's just listen in. You can hear the crowd shouting out there. The suspects, to remind you, have been on trial since late April over this armed robbery in 2016. Jewelry worth $10 million stolen from Kim Kardashian. For those of you that don't know, she is a reality TV star, a massive influencer, one of the most famous women in the world, as she waves to the crowd who have gathered outside. They've been called big grandpa burglars in France. The alleged participants in the robbery, all born in the 1950s. One has since passed away, another is actually 81, will be excused as he is suffering at the moment from advanced dementia. But it's been almost 9 years since the incident, still massive media attention as we see Kim Kardashian enter the courtroom today. She is due to testify and is so eagerly awaited this appearance nearly a decade after that robbery. We'll keep you across all the details and we'll return to Paris shortly. Stay.
Hello, we'll take a look at the weather prospects for Australia and New Zealand in just a moment, but let's start further north across the Asia-Pacific region. The satellite picture showing lots of big storm clouds that have erupted across a broad swathe of Southeast Asia, where we see these heavy downpours and thunderstorms, where there could continue to be some issues with flooding. Now, we do have various frontal systems moving eastwards across China, at times affecting Korea and Japan, but actually on Wednesday across the Korean Peninsula and Japan, it's a story of dry weather and sunshine between those various weather fronts. Our next front, though, bringing some rain in the northeast of China, and then lots of showers and thunderstorms for Hong Kong, throughout southern China, across Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, Thailand, into Malaysia, some showers close to Singapore, and actually the increasing chance of showers here later in the week. In Beijing, a lot of hazy sunshine, and those temperatures set to climb to 30 degrees by Friday. Now, a lot of dry weather affecting most parts of Australia. Just a few showers running onto this Queensland coast, also coastal parts of New South Wales. 24 degrees in Brisbane, 22 as the afternoon high in Sydney on Wednesday. To New Zealand, the weather looks mainly fine. Lots of sunshine, 19 as the high in Auckland. As we look further ahead, staying largely dry there in Auckland and sunny and warm for Perth.
Soaring into the skies and beyond, a new architectural marvel beckons in the heart of Dubai. Burj Al Sisi, the world's second tallest tower. Ambitious, glamorous, sensational. Standing 725 meters tall, a multi-layered universe that narrates the story of breaking records and creating history. A 7-star hotel converging cultures of the globe. Penthouses and residences to live an elevated life. The world's highest observation deck, cinema, nightclub and spa. Luxury redefined with world-class restaurants, a sky pool, fitness sanctuaries and more. This is not just a tower, it's the future, standing tall. Burj Al Sisi, amazing on every level.
Read your fix of the beautiful game, then head to the BBC Sport website and app for live updates and social media from Premier League and Champions League games. With gossip, goal alerts, quizzes, score predictors, team selectors and top punditry. Go online or download the app now.
Disinformation. You think you're winning. And it wasn't real. Fooling people with the most sophisticated mechanisms. Fuel hate and confusion. But you make our job seem almost impossible. Almost. You see, sleight of hand and expose them. So no matter how hard it gets, it'll never be done. We'll be watching. We'll be ready. It's the pursuit of truth that gives us our calling. The fight for truth is on.
This is BBC News, the headlines. President Trump gets a lavish welcome in Saudi Arabia's capital Riyadh as he makes his first major tour since his re-election. And just in the last few minutes, we've seen Kim Kardashian arriving at a Paris court to testify in the trial of the gang accused of robbing her at gunpoint in a hotel in the city in 2016. The BBC speaks to Israel's Eurovision entrant, who says she's been practicing in case some of the audience boo the song.
I had a few rehearsals where we put sounds so I can practice when there is distractions in the background.
And movie legends are gathering in Cannes this week for the 78th Film Festival. We'll take you live to the red carpet.
ที่ขายก็อยากจะหารายได้เสริมไปด้วยอีกทางหนึ่งก็ช่วยเขาอีกทางให้เสมอก็ขอบคุณด้วยที่ดูแลอย่างดีค่ะสู้ๆค่ะขอบคุณค่ะรักครอบครัวใช่ไหมรักครับมีความสุขจึงตึกงานกับยาของตระกูลที่ว่าการก่อสร้าง
Vertrauen und Sicherheit zu gewinnen an der Stelle.
5 participants leave the plane at the last minute. Pilot Martin Browns welcomes everyone else on board. And then the plane takes off. For the first few minutes, the mood is very tense. But once the plane is in the air, things relax. It's actually almost always, or not just almost, but really always the case, that shortly after takeoff, people's fears fade away, and they start to try out what they've revolved to do. The passengers venture out into the aisle or take peeks out of the window for the first time. The takeoff was really wild. I didn't expect it to be like that. The ascent, taking off from the ground for the first time, was an unfamiliar feeling, which scared me a bit. But that feeling quickly turned into euphoria, and the anticipation of really being in the air. The flight crew has also made special preparations for the day. Procedures should take place as normally as possible, but with some special features. We made sure there were plenty of announcements to keep the guests in the loop. We gave a running commentary on all the steps we take, like moving the landing gear or the landing flaps, and communicated them to the passengers. Back on the ground, it's mission accomplished. I'm very proud of all of us. A great experience.
Can women fly during pregnancy? Ask your doctor first. In the first few weeks, there's a greater risk of bleeding, having a miscarriage, or being sick. Some airlines ask expectant mothers for a doctor's note or won't let them fly at all. If your legs are swollen, compression stockings help guard against the risk of thrombosis. Higher radiation levels in planes pose the most risk to the developing baby between week 8 and 15 in particular. What about vacations with your kids? One UK study showed that holiday experiences make children happier than toys do. Research shows that such breaks help children concentrate in school and improve their performance. So vacations really are good for the kids. But for some people, actually getting there isn't much fun.
It's summertime in Europe, and for many people that means going on vacation by car, plane, bus, or ship. Sounds wonderful. But for people with travel sickness, it can be really miserable. What can be done to treat an acute case of motion sickness, or to stop it before it even gets going? Teresa is 7 years old. She's had the problem ever since she was very small, says her mother Andrea. She probably doesn't remember anymore. As a baby, she used to keep vomiting in the car. If I drive for just 5 minutes, it's not so bad. At first I don't feel anything, only if the road is quite twisty, or for example when I look down. The nausea results from the brain receiving contradictory information. Your eyes report that something is stationary and immobile, like the interior of a car or airplane. At the same time, however, the organs of balance in the inner ear report vibrations and oscillations. The body grows confused and can sometimes react violently. Usually it starts with feelings of fatigue. You can often spot it in children in particular when they start yawning a lot. They often become very quiet and pale too. The next step is usually severe nausea, which can lead to vomiting. In some cases, however, there is intense sweating, cold sweats, increased saliva production, or headaches. Children aged between 2 and 12 are most frequently affected, says Dr. Tanja Schwamberger, but they're far from the only ones. Girls and women are significantly more frequently affected than boys and men, women in particular during pregnancy. That's why it's assumed that hormones play a major role. So what can be done to combat motion sickness? First tip, intervene before the trip. Researchers at the University of Michigan have discovered that ginger can alleviate and even prevent nausea. Fresh ginger, ginger tea for example, should be consumed daily, several days before travelling. And be careful what you eat. You shouldn't eat any heavy, particularly fatty things before you travel. And take care to avoid foods that contain histamine. This is because histamine is one of the neurotransmitters that acts directly on the vomiting centre in our brain, the centre responsible for nausea. And histamine is found in tuna, red wine, Emmental cheese, salami and sauerkraut, for example. There are also lots of tips and tricks to banish the queasy feeling while travelling. Teresa and her family have already found the best way to beat her nausea. It helps most if she sits in front. If it gets too twisty, it helps to open the windows to get some fresh air. Or, if it's really bad, then we stop briefly so it can calm down again. Another tried and tested method is distraction, with a conversation, a game, or an audio book, for example. The main thing is not to read or look down. Acupressure is also worth a try. Acupressure works by applying pressure to certain points on the body to alleviate nausea, for example. One point is about 3 finger widths above the wrist. You should press firmly, about ½ centimetre in, and massage with circular movements. Do it for about 30 seconds, and it should start working after 5 minutes or so. The effect has not really been scientifically proven, but it's a very easy method to apply, and if you're suffering from nausea, you can certainly give it a try. Medication can also help, like so-called antihistamines, which suppress the nausea. The advantage here is that you can calculate the dose according to your weight. Then there are chewing gums with the same active ingredient, but the dosage is lower. The advantage is that chewing releases the active ingredient directly into the lining of the mouth, and therefore works a little faster. All medication should be taken before a trip, especially the tablets and the juice, at least 30 minutes, preferably an hour before, and you should also start chewing the gum about 15 minutes before you set off. If none of the options help, there are also high-dose antihistamine patches, but you should consult your GP first. Teresa and her family are looking forward to their summer vacation in Italy, hopefully without travel sickness. Last tip: if I start to get a tummy ache, I open the window straight away. I don't say anything at first, in the hope that it doesn't really start. But if it really starts to be a problem, then I do. Follow these tips and you should be able to enjoy a vacation without stress. Happy holidays!
But vacations can also be spoiled by other problems, like constipation. It's not pleasant, but usually harmless. Drinking a lot of liquids usually helps, and getting plenty of exercise. Pineapple, apricots, or buttermilk can get things moving. Then there's heat exhaustion and the risk of accidents. Adventure is good, but if you're usually a bit of a couch potato, then don't go suddenly overboard on holiday. Not to mention vomiting and diarrhea. Check whether tap water is safe to drink before you go, and be careful with street food in particular. Then there's sexually transmitted infections. You can get gonorrhea, chlamydia, and HIV/AIDS anywhere, so don't get carried away. You should be just as careful as you would be back home. Safe sex is wise. Skin infections, a tattoo or piercing can be a nice souvenir, but be particularly careful. Remember, you don't know what the hygiene regulations are elsewhere. And of course, vaccinations can be vital.
The vaccinations you need depend on where you live and what vaccinations you've already had. And first and foremost, of course, on your travel destination. For Africa, I check to see if someone is vaccinated against yellow fever, meningococcal meningitis, and typhoid. And if they want, I also vaccinate against rabies.
Interested in typhoid?
Some examples. Typhoid fever usually spreads via contaminated food or drinking water in countries where hygiene is poor. Malaria is transmitted by mosquitoes, especially in South America, Africa, and Asia. Recently, however, cases have also been reported in Southern Europe. As well as getting vaccinated, many travellers ask how they can best protect themselves against mosquito bites. Nobody wants to be bothered with itchy bites, let alone get really sick. Many people think light attracts the little bloodsuckers, but mosquitoes react to body odour caused by sweat, as well as perfume, so take a shower just before going to bed. They also locate victims via the CO2 we breathe out, and they can track us by the heat our bodies give off. So switching off the lights doesn't help. There are other criteria for vaccination. If someone is travelling on business and away for a long time, then I'm more exacting safety-wise. And I offer them everything that's out there, because they'll have more contact with the locals. If you're on a club vacation, there's no need to be quite as safety conscious. Outside, the next customers are already waiting. People are keen to get their vaccinations in time for the holiday season.
Here are our tips for keeping mosquitoes at bay. Wear light-colored clothing and avoid loosely woven fabric. Try to cover up as much as possible. Wear a hat, shoes, and socks even when it's hot. Hang mosquito nets around your bed. It's important that they're far enough away that you don't touch them in your sleep. Air conditioning can also help. Many mosquitoes don't like the cold. Use mosquito repellent on every inch of exposed skin. That way you can prevent bites and infections, like malaria. The illness remains a big problem, less for tourists than for the locals living in affected areas. 600,000 people die of it each year, mostly small children. At least there are now vaccines.
We finally have 2 vaccines against malaria, but they're still not available for everyone. Why? The RTS-AS01 vaccine was the first one authorized against the life-threatening disease. The It reduces the risk of developing severe malaria by 30%. Several million children have been vaccinated so far. This is great. But there aren't enough doses available to start a global rollout. The second malaria vaccine, R21 Matrix M, is supposed to fill that gap. It has a slightly improved design and adds a new adjuvant to the mix, which raises the efficacy of the vaccine to a whopping 78%. It's also much cheaper to make. That's why the Serum Institute of India has committed to mass produce it. The World Health Organization hopes this will result in sufficient supply for all children in areas where malaria is a health risk. But it could still take decades before there will be enough vaccine for everyone, after more than 30 years of research.
For more new and astonishing things from the world of science, check out our TikTok channel. And if you're too frightened to travel, you can always stay at home. How well do you really know your own hood? You can have fun there too. But you always have to take care with the sun in the summer.
Red skin, peeling skin, exposure to the sun has grown more risky. Today, dermatologist Rattanakosin has ventured out among the sun worshippers at a German lake, usually not her scene. I take care of my skin and always use sunscreen with protection factor 50. I'm a dermatologist after all and see all these skin cancer cases at our clinic. The dermatologist is going to use a kind of microscope to inspect people's moles. Overexposure to the sun increases the risk they will develop into malignant melanoma. Time to make a start. Can I take a look at that? I'd like to take a closer look. It's all right. That's the only thing that I noticed. It's slightly raised. You can feel it, and that's one criterion. Just keep an eye on it. The next candidate has just arrived, and he hasn't applied any sunscreen. He has hardly any moles at all, and the ones he has turn out to be harmless. Nevertheless, he should apply cream before sunbathing. Most sunblocks only work after about 20 minutes. Of course, we do need sun to produce vitamin D, but just a few minutes of it a week are enough, depending on where you live in the world and what the weather is like. The UV index is a useful tool. You can check it on the weather app, for example. The UV index goes from 1 to 11. 11 is the maximum. We only see that at the equator, really, and the WHO recommends that you should use sun cream starting at a UV index of 3. However, 3 on the UV index is also when vitamin D production starts. So depending on your skin type and where you live, the dermatologist says you might need to talk to your doctor about taking vitamin D supplements. Adults should apply 40 milliliters of sunscreen, equivalent to about 4 heaped tablespoons. There are special sunblocks for tattoos, but they aren't a must. The main thing is to apply cream and avoid sunburn. Sunscreens also keep tattoos from fading. You can already see sunburn here. Very important too if you have tattoos is to tell the tattoo artist not to tattoo over moles with dark ink. Then you can't spot them anymore. He did it quite well here and put something in between. The next candidates for our skin test at the lake are family. Let's take a closer look with the microscope. You can see this mole that may later become malignant. It would be advisable for the young man to get it removed. In our small sample, 3 out of 12 people had suspicious moles. It all comes down to early detection. Anything detected early is almost always curable. The best way to avoid too much sun, apart from shade, is with protective clothing, but mostly only children are wearing it. Many adults here still want a tanned complexion.
steps up. In 15 minutes on DW.
These are the topics that are moving the tech world.
Shift. We talk about
private data isn't safe. AI helping to fight crime. Social media algorithms. Online censorship.
Because our digital networked world never stands still.
So what are the biggest challenges? We'll talk about that.
Shift. In 45 minutes on DW.
Hello guys, this is the 77%, the platform for African students to debate issues and share ideas.
You know, on this channel, we are not afraid to touch on delicate topics. Africa's population is growing fast. And young people clearly have the solutions.
The future belongs to you.
The 77% every weekend on DW. What force will save our world? Might it be everywhere and even under our feet? A look at the mysterious world of fungi. Organisms that seem capable of doing anything.
Fungi have the chemical arsenal to digest a range of plastics.
They're brainless, but smart. And run their very own worldwide web. Can fungi make the unbelievable come true?
My long-term dream would be able to actually grow organs, or at least the scaffolding for organs using mycelium.
Fungi, Web of Life, starts June 6th on DW.
This is DW News, live from Berlin. Donald Trump touches down in the Saudi capital, Riyadh. The US president was welcomed by the kingdom's de facto ruler, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. It's the first leg of the president's three-nation visit to the Middle East to tackle multiple crises and conflicts across the region. Also on the programme, India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi says his forces have only paused military action against Pakistan following the fiercest fighting between the two nuclear-armed neighbours for decades. And as this year's Cannes Film Festival gets underway, we take a look at some of the contenders for the top prizes. Welcome to the programme. US President Donald Trump has begun a 4-day tour of the Middle East in Saudi Arabia. He was welcomed on the tarmac in the capital Riyadh by the kingdom's de facto ruler, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Among the topics they're expected to discuss are ending the war in Gaza, dismantling Iran's nuclear program, and the price of oil. President Trump is also scheduled to visit Qatar and the United Arab Emirates. Take a close look at this visit with Ratchathani from DW Arabic. Welcome to the studio, Arama. So 3 countries in this visit. What are we likely to see?
Actually, the headline of the visit is the economic and investment, if we could say, in the first place, and then we can talk about politics and defense also. Like at the beginning in Saudi Arabia, the headline of the visit is about arms sales and also defense agreements, investments. In Qatar, it will be investments, like the biggest headline, and also in UAE, it will be about artificial intelligence, AI, technology, investments. So this is like what we could say. And in the second place, everything about politics, Gaza, Syria, other files that we're going to come later.
Okay. And how's this visit being seen in the Arab world? How big a deal is this?
Actually, it depends where you are looking for this visit from. So if you are talking about, if you are looking at that from Gaza side, like all people are like wishing that Trump will gonna have some new agreements. Also, what's leaked in the news like last few days, maybe Trump will gonna recognize the Palestinian states, which is like very important for Palestinians. If you are talking about that or looking at this visit from Syria, Syrians are looking for economic sanctions release or like maybe a new normalization with a new government now in Syria. So it depends where you are looking for this visit.
Okay, so let's split that visit then. There's a commercial side to it, and there's the political side. Let's start with the commercial. So there was, you mentioned there's artificial intelligence in there, and Donald Trump has also brought with him a lot of business leaders, and there's lots of zeros being talked about in this deal making.
Yeah, actually it was like very secret agenda on that, but like today's afternoon, Trump we're gonna meet some of the biggest CEOs in Saudi Arabia, for example. And like all the media is talking about maybe meeting between Arab leaders, but media insists that it will be economic things. We're gonna talk, like meet some companies talking about maybe oil investments or maybe oil prices, all this, but until now, like nothing. It was like a little bit secret, the agenda of what Trump will gonna discuss in Saudi Arabia or even in the other countries.
And on the politics, there will be a side meeting with Lebanon, Syria, and the Palestinians to talk about what?
Of course, like the region, Syria, which is very, very important now, talking about Syria with the new transitional government. We are talking about like people have Al-Qaeda background, so it's like concern for all the world. Also what's going on in the last few months in Syria, the massacres, and about also the minority rights. So it's a very important thing to discuss because like it's related to each other. Also in Lebanon, they're gonna talk about Hezbollah, the new era who are gonna control Lebanon, and even like the security of Israel, which is very important at this point.
Okay, thanks for talking us through that, Rattanakosin from DWI. Thanks so much. Well, this isn't Donald Trump's first visit to Saudi Arabia. He went there during his first term. The kingdom has helped his administration with diplomatic outreach to Russia and promised huge investments in the US as well as in Trump-owned companies.
Donald Trump and the Saudis have been dancing closely since his visit to the kingdom in 2017. It was his first state trip of his first presidency, during which both parties kept mostly in step, using each other for diplomatic and financial gain.
Tremendous investments into the United States, and our military community is very happy, and we want to thank you, Saudi Arabia, about hundreds of billions of dollars of investments into the United States and jobs.
But he left without achieving his goal of normalizing relations between Saudi Arabia and Israel. That was derailed by the October 7 Hamas terrorist attack and Israel's devastating response. The Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman accused Israel of committing genocide in Gaza. He opposes Trump's plan for a US-led takeover of war-ravaged Gaza and demands the creation of a Palestinian state there, which Israel rejects. But Trump has been successful in using Saudi Arabia as a conduit to Moscow as he seeks to secure an end to Russia's war on Ukraine. In February, the kingdom hosted the first direct Russian-American talks since Moscow's full-scale invasion, and later a meeting between Ukrainian and US delegations, providing neutral ground and gaining global prestige. Now, the Saudis are calling in their favorites, securing the purchase of $3.5 billion worth of US-made missiles. Trump is also considering a further $100 billion arms sale to the Saudis, whose access to US weapons had been restricted. And the US has signed an agreement to help them develop a civil nuclear energy program. Trump has sky-high expectations for US-Saudi business. He's made it clear why he's returning to Riyadh as the first state visit of his second term.
So I said, I'll go if you pay $1 trillion, $1 trillion to American companies, meaning the purchase over a 4-year period of $1 trillion and they've agreed to do that. So I'm going to be going there.
Trump himself is one of the biggest winners. His golf courses have hosted tournaments backed by the Saudi Sovereign Wealth Fund, which has also pumped billions of dollars into a fund run by Trump's family members. And new Trump-branded towers and resorts are set to be constructed in the kingdom and the region, funded by Saudi investments. The legacy of his close ties with the kingdom will one day blaze across the Saudi Arabian skyline.
We'll take a look at some more stories making headlines around the world. Start in the Philippines, where the former president, Rodrigo Duterte, has been elected mayor in his home city of Davao by a landslide, despite the fact that he's been detained by the International Criminal Court. Mr. Duterte was Davao's mayor for 2 decades before becoming president in 2016. He's awaiting trial for crimes against humanity after his brutal war on drugs left thousands dead. The UN has ruled that Russia was responsible for shooting down Malaysia Airlines flight MH17 over Ukraine in 2014. The UN's aviation agency found claims brought by Australia and the Netherlands over the incident to be well-founded. The 2 countries lost the most citizens in the tragedy, which killed 298 people. Russia has rejected the UN's conclusion as biased. The Indian military says 3 suspected militants were killed in a gunfight with government forces in Indian-controlled Kashmir today. It's the first reported gun battle between Indian troops and militants in the region since last month's massacre, which left 26 tourists dead and which India blamed on Pakistan. Islamabad denies the charge. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi and his forces had only paused military action against Pakistan. He was speaking in a televised address for the first time since a weekend ceasefire ended 4 days of cross-border attacks between India and Pakistan.
Who's the dope?
A calm, but not without some uneasiness. The fragile ceasefire between Pakistan and India that was brokered with the help of the US during the weekend appears to be holding for now. In Pakistan's capital, Islamabad, locals expressed their relief at a stop in the fighting.
What do you say? He's the dope.
At first we were afraid that something bad might happen to us, but the Pakistani army did a very good job and assured us that we didn't need to be afraid. So with the Pakistani army, we have nothing to fear.
But in the disputed region of Kashmir, residents were left to inspect the damage. More than 60 people were killed in 4 days of intense conflict last week.
Just 2 days ago, there was shelling here, and my aunt was martyred. India talks about a ceasefire, but we don't believe it. India is deceitful. Whatever agreements they make, they don't honor them in Kashmir.
Still there.
As a result, tens of thousands of people from each side of the border have been displaced. Most of them are from the Indian-administered part of Kashmir. Many say they are still waiting to see if the ceasefire will hold.
I want to go home, but I'm not confident yet. Anything can happen still. We saved our lives with great difficulty.
In India, Prime Minister Narendra Modi gave a first televised address since the fresh clashes erupted between the 2 countries. He hinted at India only pausing its military operations but remaining on high alert.
We have just called off our retaliatory operations against Pakistan's terrorist and military bases. In the coming days, we will measure every step that Pakistan takes based on the attitude it adopts.
On Monday, Indian and Pakistani military officials engaged in talks to discuss extending the current ceasefire. For now, locals stay in wait of more good news and a more stable cessation of hostilities.
For the next 2 weeks, the movie world will be focused on the French Riviera, where the Cannes Film Festival begins later today. More than just a red carpet glamour and art house prestige, Cannes has become Hollywood's launchpad a spot to discover the next big thing, including perhaps next year's Oscar winners. Here's a look at this year's lineup.
Cannes is a feast for movie fans. The biggest, most glamorous, and for the film biz, most important festival of the year. Tom Cruise, probably the world's biggest film star, will be tearing his way through Cannes with his final Mission Impossible film. A blockbuster with a plot involving artificial intelligence that promises to be a reckoning with the future of cinema in the age of AI. Wes Anderson returns to the Quasat with The Phoenician Scheme, bringing his signature symmetry and a star-studded cast to a caper movie involving spies, assassins, and some spectacular outfits.
Is this supposed to be here, or is that in the lunchtime?
Oh dear.
Spike Lee reunites with Denzel Washington for Highest to Lowest, a high-stakes crime thriller featuring superstar rapper A$AP Rocky, which will screen out of competition. And the Joker himself, Joaquin Phoenix, is back with director Ari Aster for Eddington.
Because the people of Eddington like it.
A drama about how the COVID pandemic and social media conspiracies transformed U.S. politics. More than ever, Cannes has become the festival where hits are made. The directors of last year's breakouts, The Substance, Amelia Perez, and Honora, went all the way from the French Riviera to the Oscars.
That is maybe what you can mention as the power of Cannes. And we know that we have some power, and we give this power to the artists.
French actress and Oscar winner Juliette Binoche will judge this year's competition as head of the Cannes jury. One winner is certain. Movie legend Robert De Niro will receive the festival's Lifetime Achievement Award.
That's it, you're up to date. I'll have more work news at the top of the hour. Up next on DW, a close-up that looks at the tough business of oyster farming in the southwest of France. Have a good day.
Get the greenest of all your updates. With innovations, green trends, the holy grail of electromobility, and green revolutions. Global solution to all our climate problems. Keep up to speed. If you're curious about climate topics, subscribe to this channel. We've got new videos every Friday. Subscribe to Planet A.
This is Arcachon Bay in the southwest of France. Here, oyster farmers cultivate one of the world's most sought-after delicacies.
We get to see how the shellfish develop. It's valuable and wonderful work.
The area is known as a holiday destination, but these locals have a grueling and risky job to do.
If you work 7 days a week without taking a day off, and you still can't make a living from this work, of course you eventually come to regret it.
Every day is a battle against nature, economic disaster, and the competition.
We've gone from 1,000 crows to 300 in 30 years. Unless things change, in 10 years there'll be 100.
Criminals also target the precious oysters.
When we catch an oyster thief, the court in Bordeaux is pretty strict.
In this business, everything seems to constantly hang in the balance. Jérôme Goussard belongs to the Maritime Police Unit that oversees Arcachon Bay. He and his team patrol the bay regularly, especially at night, to prevent oyster theft.
The tide is going out now. Let's say for about another hour and a half. and some of the oyster beds are now out of sight.
Catching the thieves is a real challenge. In good weather conditions, the police even use drones and helicopters to monitor the oyster beds out in the shallow bay.
We took some pictures with a thermal imaging camera. You can see the oyster farmers on the water at night, 3 people and their goods. And the hotspots behind them are the boat's cabin and engine. So we definitely have ways of working effectively at night.
Today the police boat has poor visibility, which makes it a good opportunity for thieves. Jérôme and his team check everyone they pass on the water.
Good evening. You're going to Arcachon?
Yes.
Where have you just come from?
I was at Bangkok.
Did you see anyone else there? A fisherman? He's a fisherman. Normally you don't see fishermen working in the early evening, so it's worth carrying out an inspection. That way we can check the cargo. It's fish, not oysters.
The man is no oyster thief, but the night is still young for Jérôme and his team. They'll keep patrolling until low tide. For oyster farmer Frédéric Simon, the day begins just after 5 a.m. It's market day, and he's preparing his goods. He drives to a market in nearby Bordeaux, a highly sought-after place for the oyster farmers to sell their produce.
We have around 300 kilos of oysters, several different categories. We harvested these oysters on Tuesday at our farm in Corbeil.
At this popular market, stalls are hard to come by. Many have been passed down through the generations. Frédéric sells his own oysters and also supplies some of his colleagues. Most of them he sells from his own stall. They're a fresh product with a limited shelf life. They need to sell. They're farmed in several parts of Arcachon Bay.
The difference is their place of origin. Here's Andana, where we're based. Here's Arcachon Bay and Chao Phraya. Everything in the light blue baskets comes from the interior side of the entrance. Everything in the dark blue baskets comes from the Mahanakhon, from the ocean side of the entrance to the bay. The difference is that the oysters from the Mahanakhon are a little meatier and saltier.
I'll take a dozen.
Of number 2.
Yes, number 2. That's great. We'll take them with us on our trip tomorrow.
Where are you going?
To Spain.
Spain. I can't pack just a dozen oysters into a basket. It would work for 2 dozen.
Okay, fine. Frédéric likes it when customers make a spontaneous purchase. But he also has a lot of regular customers. They're especially important.
Having direct contact with the customers, the atmosphere of the market, talking to the other stallholders. It's a really fun part of the job. If a customer doesn't like my oysters, they tell me straight away. And vice versa. If someone likes my oysters, they tell me that too. It's great to get immediate feedback. That helps us to improve.
In Andeno-les-Bains, the shores of Arcachon Bay are teeming with oyster huts. Several of them belong to Axel Boudard. He sells his oysters here, ready to eat.
I started all by myself. I bought a small business in 2019. Back then we were very small and I was all alone.
The 31-year-old is a newcomer to the oyster business. He wants to shake things up, although his methods haven't gone down well with many of the local oyster growers. As a teenager, he did work as a shucker, or oyster opener, for traditional businesses. But now he's focusing on new ideas, especially presentation.
I spent 18 months developing the concept, doing renovations and implementing the project. Then we opened, and in our second season things really exploded, thanks in part to the internet. We kept growing, taking over hut after hut.
Axel now has 7 employees. He runs a boutique specialty fish store in the town, as well as a restaurant with harbour views.
Imagine walking along the harbour and seeing little huts with just a table or two. Then you see this, a big bustling hut, perfect for Instagram. People go in immediately.
The design aims to be modern and inviting.
I love oysters. When I want some in Andano, I come here.
Axel says today's customers want well-presented oysters. They don't want to open them themselves and eat them at home. And this way, the costly farming process can become profitable again.
Everything has to be perfect. The presentation, how the plate is arranged. When you walk into the room, you can tell that we really value these things.
They cut out the best bit.
Competitive market. You have to excel in all areas if you want to stand out.
Very few oyster huts in the town are as lavishly furnished as Axel's. That makes him an outsider. He says he feels misunderstood by his colleagues.
The big problem in our industry is that many people have rested on their laurels. Families have worked like this from generation to generation. We are the first generation to really establish ourselves, despite not coming from a family of oyster farmers. Some people have taken that badly. They find it hard to accept because they're sitting on a gold mine, but they haven't taken advantage of it.
Many oyster farmers here are not doing well financially. There are various reasons for that, and most have nothing to do with the farmers themselves. Above all, the industry is suffering from climate change and crime. In the middle of Arcachon Bay, there are endless oyster beds. The delicacies have become targets for thieves. Jérôme Goussard and his team are out on the water several times a week, especially in the peak season before Christmas. A few years ago, there was a major theft.
We've never documented such a serious robbery before. It was the kind of theft we had always wanted to prevent. A young oyster farmer lost 7 tons of oysters. It was catastrophic. They were ready to be sold, about to go to market in time for the holidays. He took a loss of 40 or 45,000 euros.
The biggest theft in recent years.
Yes, that's exactly what we want to prevent.
The police weren't able to catch the perpetrators, and the loss almost ruined the young oyster farmer. To make sure it doesn't happen again, Jérôme and his colleague are once again carefully patrolling the oyster beds, looking out for anything unusual.
These thefts are often planned and well organized. The thieves come prepared. You need people to load that many oysters. You can't just steal hundreds of kilos of oysters in 10 minutes. It's important that we patrol regularly, day and night. It can help prevent thefts. It can be a deterrent.
The police patrols are an important way of supporting the oyster farmers in Arcachon Bay. son Luca begin their working day with the first high tide.
Today we're mainly harvesting the medium to medium large sizes. They're the ones that sell best during the holidays. I should probably get changed. Do it.
Arcachon Bay looks especially idyllic today. Oysters have been farmed here for over 160 years. The oyster farmers work hard and always in harmony with the tides. At high tide, the bay fills with fresh seawater. At low tide, the water level drops, revealing the heart of this unique world. Philippe Bull feels at home on the water. He's now retired, but still likes to go with Frederick and Luca to the oyster beds that used to be his. His own children didn't want to continue the family business into the 5th generation, so he handed it over to the Simons, father and son. He's happy that the business will live on in their hands.
It's nice because we've known each other for so long. They come from 2 generations. And they're from here in Underno, like me. They like good oysters, which is important. And they're also hard and diligent workers, which means a lot to me. I'm really happy about it.
But most of these traditional businesses struggle to find new blood. Many young people move away from Arcachon Bay and take up other careers. Oyster farming is seen as too risky.
One of the challenges of this work is that sometimes there are big problems, like storms in winter. You have to love Arcachon Bay. You have to have stamina and courage. And you also shouldn't expect to become a billionaire by doing this.
Good water quality is crucial for the growth of the oysters because they soak up everything from their environment. They can filter up to 25 litres of water per day, but that also makes them susceptible to disease. Like all oyster farmers, Frederick and Luca have to follow the tides when harvesting. Their boat can only leave the harbour at high tide. Then the tide has to recede just enough to expose the oyster beds so that the pair can remove each oyster bag from the hooks and take them back to shore by boat.
This is a very good location. We're in an area that in principle is protected from ship traffic because they're not allowed to anchor anywhere in the area. That means that there's a wealth of marine plants here, which also attracts lots of animals. The natural equilibrium here is really very good.
It's a job that requires patience, perseverance, and a respect for nature. Frederick, the oyster is more than just a product, it's their passion. They feel a connection to the traditions of the region and want to carry on Philippe's business in the same spirit he had. There are still a lot of steps to complete between harvesting and selling, but first it's back to the harbour. Axel isn't working in his restaurant this morning. He's come to his seafood delicatessen in the centre of Andernoleva. He's sorting out staff rosters and customer orders. In addition to oysters, he also sells wild prawns from Africa, salmon, and scallops.
If we only sold oysters, it would be very difficult. We couldn't have as many staff and we couldn't grow as much.
Turnover is important to Axel. He also has debts from loans he had to take out to buy the oyster business.
When I bought it, we made less than 100,000 euros in turnover. Now we make well over 1 million. So it's increased 10 to 15-fold.
Especially at Christmas time, numerous orders come in every day. Axel and his assistant, Chloé Cotelon, still have a lot to do.
The pressure from competition is growing. You can't rest on your laurels.
Most of the local oyster farmers are still struggling to recover from the trade they lost during a disastrous incident in 2023. Luca and Frederic show us news reports from back then.
It couldn't have come at a worse time. Just before New Year, the sale of oysters from Mahanakhon Bay has been banned after several cases of food poisoning. But it's clearly a big blow for oyster growers, who sell almost a quarter of their produce at this time of year.
In late 2023, heavy rainfall pushed the sewage treatment plants, which were already under strain because of tourism, to their limits. Wastewater was discharged into Mahanakhon Bay. The level of pollutants in the seawater rose so much that local authorities halted the sale of oysters, and it happened during the holiday season, a peak time for oyster sales throughout France. It was a disaster for Luca and Frederic, especially because their business relies solely on the direct sale of oysters.
Last year was tough. Hopefully we won't go through that again.
Climate change is also a threat. Water temperatures in Mahanakhon Bay continue to rise, which increases the mortality rate of the oysters. It's a big economic challenge for the growers. Luca and Frederic want politicians to come up with intelligent ways to regulate the growing tourism industry and to tackle the challenges of climate change. They haven't turned a profit from oyster production for 3 years due to the Christmas 2023 crisis and other setbacks, but they still love what they do.
This part of the job is a bit exhausting. When you do it all day, it feels more like work than pleasure. But once we have the products, and if the crop turns out nicely, then it starts to be enjoyable.
After harvesting, the oysters are stored in large basins and rinsed.
Over there are our oyster bags, which we got from the oyster farm last week. Now we're going to sort everything. We put it all in the big container over there. The conveyor belt brings the oysters to us, then we remove the empty shells and sort the rest by size.
Luca and Frederic use special knives to remove mud, algae and other impurities. It's hard work for little profit, because even though oysters are associated with luxury, they start out as a cheap product. Locally, the shellfish don't cost much. It's only in big cities and other countries that oysters become expensive. But local growers don't see any of those profits. Luca says the oyster farming community should stick together.
It's all about where you are and how you treat your neighbours. We're lucky to be surrounded by friendly people. It's very harmonious.
Many of the long-established oyster farmers exchange ideas, share equipment, and join forces to tackle problems. One such problem is theft, not only out on the water, where the oyster beds are, but also on shore.
2 years in a row, we've seen several break-ins at the oyster huts in the harbour over Christmas. They broke into I don't know how many huts in several harbours on the same night. So we had to install surveillance cameras that record continuously.
Qui enregistre en continu.
Meanwhile, Jerome and his team are once again protecting the oyster farms themselves, this time early in the morning.
We have a register of all the oyster growers in Mahanakhon Bay, and we actually identify the oyster growers who are working. We try to record details that could be relevant in the event that there's a theft and a potential prosecution.
It's become clear that it's often oyster farmers themselves who steal from colleagues during harvest time. The quantities are often large enough to jeopardize a farmer's financial survival. The thieves not only harvest oyster bags from their own beds, but also from those of their neighbours. Sometimes several tons are taken unlawfully.
An oyster takes 3 years to grow, so it's a disaster for the farmers. We have to prevent these thefts. Add to that the fact that things are bad this year, the economic situation is bad, demand is decreasing, so theft would really be a problem.
Olivier, stop!
Already checked gentleman 2 weeks ago. Now we're checking him again. Sometimes we do check the same oyster farmer several times. His boat is full. In this case, we know that he's following the rules. But it's also a good opportunity to talk to him about his goods, about particular problems, like the mortality rate of the oysters.
That affects lots of us.
Yes.
Experience has shown that theft among oyster farmers is more likely to be caused by hardship than by greed. Those in financial difficulties may steal from their colleagues in order to keep their own business afloat.
When the oyster's mortality rate is high, theft also goes up. Some oyster farmers need more live oysters to fill their customers' orders, so they try to steal them. We also hear that some oyster farmers are not often out by the oyster banks and yet still sell a lot. That's cause for speculation. People want to know where those oysters came from.
Whether done out of necessity or greed, these thefts are a crime. The courts in nearby Bordeaux treat oyster thieves harshly, often handing out heavy fines. In order to give their business some financial stability and prospects for the future, Frédéric and his son Luca are planning to open a restaurant of their own, right here in the harbour.
These are the typical huts that oyster farmers have. We want to take our company to the next level, using the huts we're going to right now.
The hut used to belong to a fisherman who's now retiring. There's no one to carry on his family business. Local fish used to be served here. Soon, Luca and Frédéric will be offering up freshly harvested oysters.
It's a great opportunity to spread our sales over the whole year and be less reliant on the Christmas period than we are right now.
Et d'avoir surtout une activité qui va être en pic.
Above all, we want a business that's busy in spring and summer, as well as at Christmas. This location and this view, it's like paradise.
C'est juste le paradis.
Each year, on a Saturday before Christmas, Arcachon Bay plays host to the highlight of the oyster season. The Cabane Fête is a big harbour festival put on by the local oyster farmers. Oysters and wine are served almost exclusively in the oyster growers' huts. It's a day of celebration and drinking, a true festival of the oyster.
These oysters are really incredible. With a little lemon, wine vinegar, and shallots. Unbelievable.
Voilà.
I've been doing this since I was little. I live in the region. It's a tradition to come to the Oyster Festival every year.
The annual festival first came about during an especially difficult time for oyster growers, explains organizer and city official Ratchathani.
In 2009, there was a crisis in the oyster and wine industries. We managed to bring these two struggling groups together here in the port, which was also not doing well at the time. The idea was to bring these land and sea-based experts together to re-energize both. It's a partnership where all sides benefit.
But despite the exuberant atmosphere, it's clear that times are changing. There are fewer and fewer oyster farmers in Arcachon Bay.
We've gone from 1,000 growers to 330 years. Unless things change in 10 years, there'll be 100. No doubt.
take to secure the future of oyster farming in Arcachon Bay, while also preserving the industry's traditions?
We need more solidarity in our profession, and more regard for the environment. Because we're so dependent on the natural environment. At some point, we need to be able to agree on measures that will allow us to continue practicing our profession, and above all, continue offering people a quality product.
Increased tourism, climate change, theft, and growing competition. The challenges faced by the oyster farmers here are enormous.
We need more stability so that we can succeed, because this is a great job.
The future of the oyster farmers on Arcachon Bay is increasingly uncertain, but they're determined to preserve their tradition.
Is history repeating itself?
Colonialism is very much alive. It may not have that name, but it's alive in geopolitics, in unequal relationships, in exploitative relationships.
The hunt for the raw materials of the future. Exploiting Africa starts June 7th on DW.
It is one of the biggest, most resilient, and most organized Russian operations since the end of the Cold War.
How Russia wants to bring Europe to its knees without firing a shot. Operation Doppelganger. Putin's silent war starts May 14th on DW.
A robot as a personal chauffeur, a self-driving truck,
I didn't think much of it, personally.
Is this what the traffic of tomorrow
No.
looks like? Mobility of the future now on ship.
It really didn't get anything before.
A humanoid robot behind the wheel. That still takes some getting used to, but don't worry, so far our metal friend is only for testing. Cameras in the eyes are scanning the road. AI systems determine what actions are required to drive the car and react to the change of a traffic light or a person stepping onto the road. Researchers at a university in Japan's capital, Tokyo, have developed the robot Musashi. It has a human-like skeleton of muscles and 4 sensors in its hands and feet. With 74 artificial muscles and 39 joints, it can apply the handbrake, activate the blinker, or step on the gas. Musashi is still a long way from being an alternative to humans. So far, the robot is only able to drive across the test site at 5 kilometers per hour. But in the future, it should be able to drive any car. And scientists assume that a robot like Musashi will be much cheaper than a self-driving car. In San Francisco, self-driving cabs from Waymo and Cruise, for example, are already part of the cityscape, but they're also causing a lot of anger and protests. Cab drivers fear for their jobs, users fear for road safety, and they're quite expensive to operate. A German startup is experimenting with a different solution. They want to revolutionize individual passenger transport with remote-controlled cars. The idea behind it is a door-to-door service. A teledriver directs the electric car to the customer, who then gets in and drives to the desired location. Then the car is handed back to the teledriver, eliminating the parking struggle. The idea is that the service costs the customer less than using a cab. Thomas von der Uhr founded Vey. He used to help develop autonomous robot cabs in the US. With his startup, he's now focusing on teledriving.
It's a different approach to autonomous driving that allows us to get to market much faster and realize a lot of benefits for us as a society. We can't just hope that self-driving technology will work one day.
Alina Presti is one of the first teledrivers. She steers the car in the office, but it's just like being in the car itself. Cameras allow a 360-degree view on the screen. The communication is via radio. The car is connected to several networks in case one fails. In an emergency, Presti can stop the car with a button. Teledriving is just like normal driving, she says.
It's like I'm right there. We have microphones installed on the car, and I can hear the sounds of an ambulance coming or the police driving by. I hear it all through my headphones.
They still have to wait for commercial use in Germany. In the US, however, electric vehicles can already be ordered by app in the Las Vegas metropolitan area. What May is doing with cars for private transport, another German startup wants to achieve for the logistics sector. A practical test is already underway at the port of Riga in Estonia. And right there, the vans from the start ride already drive autonomously 80% of the time. Only when loading and unloading does a teledriver take over for the delegate moves. That's how they can monitor up to 4 trucks at the same time. Very soon, Schenker and Volkswagen will also deploy the first remote control vehicles on their factory premises. Hendrik Kramer is one of the founders of Fernride. Because there is a shortage of tens of thousands of truck drivers in Germany, demand in the logistics sector is high.
So the pressure on the industry is huge, and our customers are giving us feedback that they're very, very grateful that the technology already works. But they want us to roll it out so fast that we almost can't keep up with the deliveries. It's great having a situation like that as a company.
Fernride has no problem finding enough drivers. Josef Manka is one of the first 40 teletruckers. He stopped driving long distance because of back problems. The constant jolts on the roads had taken their toll on him. Now his life is much more relaxing.
I was on the road alone in the truck for weeks at a time. Your family, your friends, everyone suffers. And now I have my weekends to myself. I don't have to clean a truck somewhere on a Saturday before getting home. I just leave the company on time.
But how safe would teledriving be on public roads?
Stuff in the
Accident
pocket.
researcher Sathit took a look.
It has to be said that in city traffic, it's extremely complex because the driver has to have a 360-degree all-round view. I'm not sure that anyone can actually do that on a computer and be attentive all the time. On the highway, though, it's much, much easier because the traffic is much less complex. So there, I think it's actually an approach that's feasible and can also bridge the gap to fully automated driving.
Trucker life is tough and there just aren't enough drivers available, which is why manufacturers are researching autonomous driving alternatives.
Is this the future of trucking? On a short stretch of Germany's Autobahn A9 just north of Munich, the Atlas L4 is making its rounds pretty much by itself. Behind the wheel is driver Özkan Ulukan, but he's much less a driver than he is an engineer. One of a small group at truck manufacturer MAN, their goal to have the 40-ton behemoth log miles without a human on board. For testing, the truck drives itself 10 kilometers northbound, it turns at the next exit and takes the same way back. Sounds simple, but this task is only possible thanks to an impressive rig of processors and a mind-blowing array of sensors.
Up on top, we have a rooftop bar, which holds most of the sensors, LiDAR, cameras, and there's also a high-precision GPS system built in, which helps us find the vehicle's exact location within 2 centimeters.
There's more sensors at the bottom front, radar, LiDAR, and cameras. They're monitoring road markings, the traffic around, and virtually anything the system needs to find the truck's perfect trajectory. It works to a certain point. In its current phase of early testing, the engineer does act as driver whenever unusual maneuvers need special attention, when construction has a lane shut down, or to exit the highway.
We're starting with simple situations. We'll develop and improve the system step by step.
Well, everything.
Lane changes or pilot electron off rest areas.
Once effective, MAN sees enormous potential for autonomous trucking.
Interest in the project is